soul. Why in a space got constellations? Ooh, yeah. And all those inner conversations.
You gotta talk to yourself like you in love.
They help me to shine.
With yourself.
Hold yourself a little tight.
4 times Grammy Award winner Robert Glasper has worked with some of the biggest stars in music, including Kendrick Lamar, Lauryn Hill and Herbie Hancock. From band member to composing the soundtrack to the Miles Davis biopic, Miles Ahead, Robert has had quite the career. France 24 met up with him at the Rock en Seine festival just outside Paris to discuss his album compilation, Black Radio 3.
They help me to shine.
Robert Glasper, thank you so much for chatting to France 24 today.
Absolutely, thank you for having me.
You're over for a number of dates here in Europe, but
Yes.
for people who are discovering you for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about your music? Because it straddles so many different genres. It's been in the jazz sector, in the hip-hop sector, contemporary, urban. How did that happen?
I grew up, playing gospel music in church, and I'm from Houston, Texas. And my mom sang gospel music, R&B music, Broadway music, all kinds of music. So I grew up kind of a musical mutt. And from that, I went to a performing arts high school where I majored in jazz. And then from there, moved to New York for college, which is where I fell in love with hip hop and started really playing hip hop live. Because that was in the late 90s, kind of when this live hip hop bands were, like the Roots started kind of coming out and made live bands cool again. My world's just kind of crisscrossed and kept going.
Going far, but going nowhere. But I found somewhere to go. I'm going home to find you.
I read that you were taken very young to clubs by your mother, amongst others.
Absolutely, yeah. My mom was a singer, and she performed in many clubs all the time. That's what she did for a living, and so, a lot of times she couldn't get a babysitter, so she would bring me to the club with her. So I would be in the back, of the club, and I was a little boy.
What are your memories of that?
Having waitresses come check on me, you know what I mean? Like the whole wait staff at all the clubs would come back and check on me. She come check on me in between songs and stuff. You okay?
Who were your heroes growing up, musicians?
I mean, at first I was into sports mostly, you know what I mean? I got into music in a real way, maybe I was like 13, in a real way, 13, 14. My first musical jazz influence was Chick Corea, He's my first, rest in peace, Chick, you know what I mean? He's my first jazz influence. But I had gospel influence before that, you know what I mean? Kirk Franklin, Keith Jarrett, Herbie Hancock,
Yeah, who you've performed with a number of times, which must be kind of a dream
Absolutely.
come
Absolutely.
true.
Herbie's the man. It's always great to have Herbie come to your show and sit in with you, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
psh.
And he's also someone who's like straddled different genres of music, from traditional jazz with the big brackets to exploring electronica. Do you think the fact that nowadays people are categorizing less music and the boundaries are blurring more is a good thing?
Boundaries keep blurring, which is really cool. It takes you out of the box in certain genres, you know what I mean? And Herbie learned that from Miles, being with Miles and seeing Miles do it. And then Herbie was able to do it, and because of those people like that, I'm able to do it, you know what I mean? But it's definitely, the more it gets done, the more doors get knocked down and boundaries disappear.
Black superhero. Every block, every hood, every city, every ghetto. Need a black superhero. Our own kind took nip from us. Money still reading God we trust.
You're also known for Black Radio, which you've released the 3rd compilation earlier this year. Can you tell us a bit about the concept behind it?
Yeah, Black Radio is basically like my album of just collaborations of different artists that I like, that I love, that I feel we would meld and make something great together, It started off kind of by accident. It kind of snowballed. I was doing a record and I wanted to do half of the album with special guests and the other half just my band. But as I started getting the guests, more guests just kind of started hey, you doing an album? What? I'm not on it. What's you know? And I was like, oh, well, you want to be on it? All right, cool. And it kind of snowballed into a whole album full of guests, you know. And shout out to Quincy Jones. Like Quincy, it's like the first person to really do that, to my knowledge. You know, it's kind of patterned kind of after that, you know, that kind of vibe where I produce it and also write and perform, but it's just a slew of other artists, you know. And some of the artists you take out of their normal element and put them in this element, more of a hip hop, R&B, jazz element. And they sound different, and it's just cool, you know what I mean?
And is it also a bit to kind of make jazz more mainstream in the good sense of it, this pushback of like elitism that you have an image of jazz? Yeah,
absolutely. And the reality is, my first few albums are jazz records, but I do records of all sorts, you know what I mean? There are certain tracks that are not jazz tracks, they're a hip hop track. Yeah. But because I'm known as a jazz artist, everything I do, they're like, you're pushing jazz. It's like, I'm just playing hip hop really, but I'm a jazz artist doing jazz. So I guess in that sense, it opens the door more.
And also working with Kendrick Lamar, which has been like, you know,
Absolutely.
That's something that's supposed to be just, you know, a one-off track that turned into something.
The Pimp Butterfly sessions, those were great. And he was very courageous in using jazz artists that are now, the young guys that are now, you know what I mean, doing it now and game changers now. Myself, Kamasi Washington, Terrace Martin, you know, a lot of cats. So most of the time when hip hop artists mix jazz with something, it's normally with like, you know, an album that's sampled from somebody that's probably not alive anymore. You know, they go to the past for it. But here Kendrick was, you know, fearless to do it, make music now with people in the jazz world that are here.
I need 40 acres and a mule, not a 40 ounce in a pit bull. Bullshit. Matador, had a door knocking. Let him in. Who's that? Genito's best friend.
There's another artist who is incredible, Nina Simone, whose work you've explored a number of times, notably with Lauryn Hill. I wanted to ask you, because she said that it was an artist's duty to reflect the times.
Absolutely.
If you look back at your own career, what would you say you've reflected on the most? Because I think it's hard to tell when you're actually in the midst of something, but when you look back at all the records you've released.
I think I reflected just literally what she said, the time we are in, you know what I mean? So the vibes of the music that are happening now, you know what I mean? My influences, I mix with jazz, my influences, which are now influences, which is like when I was first starting, for sure, like Jay Dilla mixed with jazz.
It's a dream come true. One more time, I want you here, word, yes. Being with you all alone, like a dream. Break it down right here. Make my dreams.
Social driven stuff too, you know, on my records, you know, I have like some spoken word artists or somebody, you know, or a thinker that's talking just about issues of the day, of the time.
You know, just the idea of how black people in this culture and society are framed and how everything possible is done to sever and diminish your true power. When you speak about the superhero-ness of our communities, every ghetto, every block, every street corner, really all those men and women are divine.
And a lot of it is unintentional. A lot of it is I'm just living my truth and living my now. And as long as you do that, you're reflecting the times. With jazz, unfortunately, most of it is so in the past that when you're of now, it seems like you're in the future.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because you notice jazz voices coming back. There's obviously new soul, but even someone like Billie Eilish, I think the way she sings is very jazz.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
And super interesting.
Billie Eilish randomly reminds me of Chet Baker.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Her vocals. I love Billie Eilish, and Chet Baker's vocals are dope too. And the way it's recorded too, and you know, it's very close and very in your face, the vocal.
You're known for your collaborations on Black Radio. Any artists you'd like to collaborate with in particular?
Yeah, I want to collaborate with Stevie Wonder for sure, in a real way. We've been on some tracks together, but never like sat down to work with each other, you know what I mean? So that's like, he's like number one on my list. Stevie, then Tom York.
Stevie, if you hear this or watch this, well, watch this, a bit complicated, but sorry.
Yeah.
So I know that you are going to be doing a residency in the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York for a month. Would you ever consider doing this in Paris?
I would do it in Paris. I would just have to have a venue, find a venue that caters to jazz and R&B and hip hop, the right sound system where I can do all the different music and all the different vibes I want to do. You know what I mean? But I love Paris. I've been coming here for probably over 20 years. You know what I mean? So this is definitely one of the homes away from home, you know.
And a home for jazz men such as Miles, who spent a number of times.
Screaming
Jay Hawkins.
A lot of musicians lived here before, and this is the stomping grounds for a lot of cats. So yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Speaking of French musicians, are there any ones in particular that you're aware of?
Yeah, well, I got some. Jackie Terrason's one of my guys, jazz piano player, very, very great jazz piano player. I came up listening to him a lot, for sure. He's the one that sticks out for me as far as like somebody that actually was an influence on me, you know what I mean?
When can we expect your next Black Radio compilation to come out?
I don't know. I wasn't going to do a third one. Like this third one was kind of because of the pandemic and my fans were asking for it, and I felt like during the pandemic I needed to do something for them. And it was a good project for me to do during the pandemic to try to figure it out, because between 2 and 3 it was 8 years. I wasn't going to do a 3. So I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do a 4, you know what I mean? So, you know, we'll see.
Robert Glasper, thank you so much for chatting to us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Picture dirty hands and soil planting to feed the future. Picture meat so fresh, so clean, cleaner than loofahs. Picture teaching a class, divina la vida pura. Picture me as a doctor, I'm saying tengo la cura. Picture me sipping natural herbs through tip of the hookah. Picture me living much better than great, I'm living super.